Hi, I'm Lowell Joseph Gallen, and I would like to welcome our live audience and our viewers to the second talk for our program this evening, which is on the subject of where we are now on the kidnapping of Yemenite, Iraqi, North African, and Balkan Jewish babies in the period after the State of Israel was established in 1948. From 1949 to the 1960s, our first speaker was Dr. Yitzhak Karam, who will introduce our second speaker sitting next to me, Dr. Shubeli. Thank you. Thank you for coming from Ashkelon to Jerusalem, Rehovot, to participate in our program. Dr. Shubeli, who is Yemenite himself, is a dentist, and we're very glad to have him join Dr. Karam for our Root and Branch Association English Language Conference and Lecture Series program this evening at the OU Israel Center in Jerusalem. Now Dr. Karam is going to introduce Dr. Shubeli.
I wanted this to be a surprise because just in addition to hearing me, you're going to hear someone who has a very special message. This man has helped continue to put the Yemenite and kidnapping issue on the agenda in Israeli society and maybe even internationally. And the idea is that this forum is very important and very significant and is long-winded, and it's not a one-time thing, okay? And the idea is that Rafi, we need to do this cooperatively. Ashkenazim and Sfaradim and Mizrahim together. This is a Jewish issue, this is a humanistic issue, okay? And you know, Rafi has a lot of Yemenite audiences. I wanted this to be the regular audience for other people, and you know, because it makes vibrations, okay? This isn't just 15 people coming to a lecture. This is significant, and Lowell Aryeh has had very significant people talk in the past 10 years, 15 years about this issue, and Rafi is the continuation. We need this collaboration, okay? And if it's just a Yemenite issue, then it won't have the same potency. And if it's just the Sephardic issue, it won't have the same potency. This is an Israeli issue, this is a Jewish issue, and this is a moral issue. And without any further ado, take it away.
First of all, I'm glad to be here and good evening. I met Yitzhak by... Okay, do you hear me?
No, I need to put you a little closer to the mic, gently, soft voice. So if you move it as close as possible, that would
Can you hear me now?
come a little closer.
Talk into the mic.
Yeah, talk into the mic.
Into the mic.
You can even take it off. Yeah,
I can
that's better.
talk like this.
Right.
Okay,
Speak loud.
let's put it. Okay. I will start with making general facts and maybe figures about this affair, and then I will end with maybe answering some of your questions. First of all, I want to say that the first complaint that I know about a kidnapped child dates to 1929, which is many
Earlier.
years before Israel was declared, as you all know, at 48. I have many cases during the early 40s, which is also before Israel. It's in the Hayishuv era. And the last case that I know, that is Yaldei Teman classic case, it's from the mid-70s. Actually, it's from 73. So although the majority of cases are at the early days of the mass immigrants to Israel, we have a phenomenon that dates through decades, not through several years. Although all the Israeli investigation committees restricted the phenomenon to 48-54, our claim is that is a much more essential essential phenomenon and needs to address ideologically and not only historically or bureaucracy or balagan or whatever of the mass immigrants to Israel. It needs a much deeper discussion, which the Israeli society and the Israeli governments avoid doing till this very day. So this is one thing, the issue of from and up to. The other issue is the number of children, and there was a question earlier about this. We formal complaints after all the restrictions of the years and all the other restrictions that was made gets high to 1,053 cases. Formal complaints that was given to the investigation committees. Since these committees were not authorized to check up complaints before 48 or after 54, obviously the number is much higher, and we have also many cases from those very years that didn't even go and actually made formal complaints from a variety of reasons. One of the reasons was that there was no trust in the official investigation committees, which I also don't trust them, so it's not a surprise. Or a variety of other personal reasons that I don't have time to get inside now, but we now know that we estimate that the number of the kidnapped children is thousands. It can be more than 10,000, like Yitzhak said before, but it's definitely thousands. It's not hundreds, it's not 1,000 and a bit or whatever. It's many thousands of children throughout these decades. Well, the fact that children are being kidnapped from the families was known when the kidnapping was taking place. It was known because in discussions in HaKnesset, in the Israeli parliament, the issue was brought up and people were talking about it. And a member of HaKnesset, Cohen Meguri from Herut, Yemenite origin member of HaKnesset, asked, is a Yemenite child a merchandise? Which means that they were sold for adoption, and the number of $5,000 came up throughout the years. And we know that people were adopting child inside Israel and also outside Israel, because Rabbi Avidora Cohen went to the States and he found there a phenomena of Yemenite or colored children in Ashkenazi families, and he was asking and inquiring about this, and they were telling him that there was a Rabbi Bernard Bergman, who was giving children for money for adoption, and he comes back to Israel. Nobody wants to hear him, so he goes to a very opposing newspaper, Ha'olam Hazeh, and Uri Avneri was the only one who published this very important article, which headed the Yemenite children were sold to America for $5,000 a head, for one head, and it was described as the most horrified discovery of the year or something like this. So there was 3 investigating committee, formal investigating committees. One in '67, which was a lesser authorized investigating committee of 2 clerks, the Bahalul-Minkowski committee. The second one was also not a national investigating committee. It was the Shalgi committee headed by a judge. And the last one, which was the higher authorized committee, The Cohen Kedmi committee was after the Yahud riots in 95, and they ended in 2001. We have good reasons to reject all the committee's reports and excuses, and I'm not sure I have the time to go into details, but when you look even at the personal family files that they bringing up, there are, first of all, they haven't found what happened to 69 children. Till now, 69 families were never given an official answer what happened to their children. Even after 3 committees and 153 complaints, formal complaints. But if you look at the solved cases, you see that many cases should have been included in the 69, should have been added to the 69, because in several cases they said, well, there is a high probability that this child died. They don't actually know that he died. For example, they use a reconstructed burial book. What is that? We say that it's forgeries. They used forgeries because the state can give you whatever documents they want. Let me give you one example about Israeli official documents. The Shalgi committee gave the families answers in '94, and they gave many families certificate of death, official certificate of deaths, and they said your child have died. Then there was, before that, few months before that, there were the Yahud riots in the Yahud affair headed by Rabbi Uzi Meshulam, that was mentioned here before, and they gave death, and then the Shalgi committee ended. They gave the answers to the families, including the death certificates, and then there were discussions about constructing the next committee, the Cohen Kedmi committee in '95. So the Shalgi committee sent these same families documents that says, well, you got a death certificate after a committee in the Prime Minister office, headed by a judge. Shalgi was a judge, and working for 6 years, from '88 till '94, and they found your child is dead. We now suspend the death. So the child who was 5 minutes ago dead, now he is missing again, and we are waiting for the next committee to do whatever they want. So you can see why we don't take Israeli official documents seriously. If after 6 years of investigation of a committee headed by a judge, yeah, and they give you results, and then they said, oh, we take it back, and now we are waiting again. So what is this death certificate, and what is the base ground of this death certificates that were given to thousands of families? This is what I ask. So now I'm getting to what is happening now. Look, every 20 years, with one exception, the Yahud affair, there is a peak in the protest campaign about the Yemenite children affair. It was in the 60s, in the 80s, the exceptions was in the 90s, and now we are 20 years after the 90s, inside in another peak of the protest. And what we now want from the government is not another investigation committee. We want full access to every document that the government haven't burned or destroyed or whatever, because most archives are destroyed, as we well know. And we want to see for ourselves what actually happened. We want to make our own conclusions. We want to the government to help families to get inside relevant archives, hospitals, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, or the other government officials, and even into archives of private organizations like WIZO or HaJoint, or the Central Zionist Archive here in Jerusalem also. We know that they have materials. So
Did anyone ask them to open their archives?
well, the investigation, WIZO tried to hide that they do have archives that deals with Yemenite and other Eastern children, Eastern children affairs. They have dealt with many. They are a key establishment in our affair, and we know that their facilities were involved, and they tried to hide their archive from even the investigation committee, the last one. And they were actually, when Clara Sashi, I think she was called, the one who in charge in WIZO in this, she was brought to the committee, and I think unwillingly, and she was questioned about the concealing of having relevant material, and she was kind of scrolling on the stand, and she as I remember, she denied that they tried to hide anything, although they did. They actually did. So let me make some other general observation about the affair. About the ideological background, which I think was, some of it were mentioned earlier. Since it began in late 1920s, maybe early 1930s, it needs to be dealing with the basic, I came to understand at least, it needs to be dealing with discussion with the basic ideological Zionist movement, and the understanding that parts of these ideologies were very problematic, and I came to the conclusion that taking out a non-Ashkenazi child from his parents, not only in the kidnapped children affair, also in the Moroccan immigrants to Israel and other related affairs, was considered to be a moral act, because we are saving the children not only from his parents, actually. And when I look back even at the press, at those wonderful, so-called wonderful times, we see that the Eastern parent was considered not only damaging the soul of the child, he was even considered to be a real danger for his life, because they were talking about, especially I have found talks about Yemenite mothers who eat all the food that was given to the children, and they give the child just something to drink or some piece of bread, and they eat all the rations of the food in the transient camp that were given to their own children, which also raised the question, how did we manage to survive in Yemen for nearly 2,000 years without Ashkenazim coming to rescue us there, to rescue the children or whatever they need to rescue. So it is very important for me to say that it was considered a moral act, an imperative act to do. If you're a good Zionist, a good moral person, this is what you need to do. So, it relates to Israeli society in many areas. Let me remind you that because we didn't have a real discussion about the problematic sides of basic Jewish Ashkenazi Zionist ideology, we came to another phenomenon of injecting Ethiopian women against pregnancy in the last, which lasted, I think, in the 90s and even 2000, first decade, and it was in Israeli media. It was stopped, I think, not so many years ago. I think 4 or 5 years ago, it came to Israeli media, and they were stopping giving them because they didn't want them to have children.
This was
Yeah.
a permanent injection?
No, it was every 3 months they got an injection. It starts in Ethiopia, and Kupat Cholim just continued. They summoned the women every 3 months, and they gave them another injection. It's called Depo-Provera injections. It is well known in Israeli sphere. Maybe in outside Israel it's not so known, but and I suspect that the joint might have some sort of involvement even here, not only in the Yemenite immigration to Israel.
How widespread was that?
I'm not sure that I can. I know that in the South District, when it was from there, the claim came into media. The problem was that somebody noticed that Ethiopian women have less babies than rich Ashkenazi people in North Tel Aviv. And he said, why? Why is that? Because it's unnatural if you look at it. And then they started to ask the women, and they realized that the women are given injections that some women said was a condition to coming to Israel. It was some sort of something that they said, if you don't get this injection, well, we might not get you to Israel.
Stipulation.
Yeah.
All Ethiopian women of childbearing age?
I'm not sure that I can say all Ethiopian women.
50%?
I'm not sure.
You know.
I'm not sure.
Who understand
But it was a very broad phenomenon. Look, you can't have 100% in any case, in any discussion, but it was high enough so the rates of the birth, when it was significantly low than any other group inside Israel. So and unlike the rates of birth in Ethiopia, so something. So it was so coincidence that somebody. She was a good person. She wanted to volunteer. She bought toys, 2 little babies, and she went to Kiryat Malachi. So she thought she would meet, and then she realized that there is no babies to volunteer to cheer them up. So she tried, and so you see that it's the same ideology of the kidnapping children lies here. So we need this discussion now. We don't need it. We needed it yesterday. And I'm not saying that Israel has no beautiful sides. It does. So, but in order to make tikkun, you have to realize and make a real discussion. You cannot put problems under the rug.
I want to ask you, at what point did you change the goal of the struggle? Because it used to be just be the Yemenite children, and now it's the Yemenites in the Balkans, in North Africa, in the Middle East. So talk about the others, besides the Yemenites. What
I
is the
think
phenomenon?
till the early 90s, the Yemenites, that there are 2/3 of the official complaints are Yemenite babies. And the other third is mostly Mizrahim. And there are 1 or 2 3% of non-Mizrahim, which means Ashkenazim, and most of them is east to the German-speaking area in Europe, which means Poland, Romania, Russia and this kind of, which was in Europe they were called the Ostjuden, which is not a very positive adjective or title.
Depiction.
Yeah. And these are the Ashkenazim that are involved in the Yemenite, almost 100% of them. And there were a very minority in the cases, of course, and a very small minority. And till the 80s, the Yemenites were still are the heads of this campaign, and everybody else joined them, and they were only asking, where are our children? Tell us the truth, and we don't want to hang anybody, we don't want to take revenge of anybody, but you need to tell us the truth. It was a very, to me, very mild and moderate question to ask. From the early 90s, it started with Rabbi Meshulam. There was a ideological challenge. We started, him and us started, and I am part of the generation that is a result of the Yahud affair and what happened there. And we started to ask questions that are an ideological challenge to what is really happening here. And we still are asking, where are the children? But we are asking a whole other, why did it happen, for example? And we know that elsewhere in the world, similar affairs also happen. And we make, in Australia, even in the United States, Indians, Native Americans.
Children were stolen?
Yeah. There is even a movie called Lost Child, about a Jewish family adopting an Indian child, and she went back to the reservations and she meets her brothers, because it's a movie about, to my understanding, about a valid case, about a true case. So, and in Canada, also Native Americans, and in Australia, of course, the Aborigines. Even in England, there is a big affair, and have also documentations about it in Greece. You have in many countries that are supposed to be liberal countries. Now, we did have these affairs, and there is something unique to every country, and also something in common to all these affairs. In all these affairs, there is one group that is deciding what's best. It can be saving the child from his parents. It can be for in the name of eugenics. It can be in the name of social efficiency. There are cases like in Sweden and England that there were sterilizing women, even in the States, sterilizing black women. It comes from the same basic...
In Greece, there were the communists in the Civil War, which lasted from like 44 to 51. They kidnapped 30,000 in the villages which they controlled. They kidnapped 30,000 kids and sent them to Eastern Europe for re-education. Mostly the Czechoslovakia, also the Soviet Union.
Okay, now...
For example.
So you have ideology and you have money. Also money is involved. It's a mixed up. There is no such thing as a uni cause. You have many causes. It's complex. You have money. You have ideology. You have the ability to do so, because the population that you're dealing with is... Let me remind you that when the Yemenites came to Israel, all their properties and gold and jewelry was stolen by the official representative of the Zionist
Jewish agency.
But it's of not individuals.
In Hashed, in the transient camp outside Aden, they were stripped up from their manuscripts, from the written culture, from their clothes, traditional clothing, from the jewelry, from the money, from everything.
Where did the
They
jewelry
came
go to?
here
The Sochnut?
The Sochnut, the joint.
The individuals or the
Yeah,
organization?
it was organized. It was organized by the officials of the camp, which was the Sochnut and the Joint and the government of Israel, and they were stripping the new immigrants from everything they had. So they came here with nothing, So that they were very much dependent on the whoever dealt with them here in the transient camp. They had nothing, literally nothing. So they were very much weakened, and so you have the ability to do so because the population you're dealing with is very much weakened and dependent on you. So you can.
This only happened to the Ethiopians or to the Yemenites, or also to the Moroccans and others?
Well, I'm more. I know more about Yemenites from obvious reasons. But I heard that other Eastern also suffered from same problem.
Theft of their properties.
Yeah, I heard that there are similar. I don't know the extent. I don't know how it was. In the Yemenite, it was a whole because it was all the people were stripped out. We know now, and we even know a bit about the manuscripts. They said that there was a fire in the port in. Ports that it was all burned, but we know now that this was the fire was organized in the corner of the warehouses there by Mentish, that was mentioned by he was from the mafia from Bulgaria or Saloniki, and he was connected with Mapai, and we know that he was actually asked by Mapai to stage sort of a fire, but we now know that the manuscripts are
Sifrei Torah,
yeah, and also
personal documents,
documents that also of rabbis throughout the generation that wrote books and wrote other
like religious compositions written on cloth.
All kinds of Judaica.
What was the reason for that?
And now we know that Israeli part of it was stolen by people, actual people who saw what is happening, and they were selling it throughout the world, and part of it also came to Israeli archives, and we now know that there is a great collection of Yemenite manuscripts in Ben Tzvi Institute, in Mossad Harav Kook.
Also the National Library. Some of these things, many of the things stolen from the people when they arrived and they were stripped, or from
they
their
were also salvaged
containers.
From these primitives that they don't know how to take care of it,
stuff that
like
was,
the children.
Stuff that was stolen from the containers ended up in the National Library. There's a book written about the stolen manuscripts in the National Library. A lot of it deals with Yemen.
Yeah.
It sounds like the colonialist mentality of noblesse oblige. Noblesse oblige meant that the British or the French were more civilized people, and then they had an obligation to the Africans, etc. And they know what's best for them, and they can re-educate.
You can actually see it that way. Look, Lynn, as I see it, the enlightening movement, Kant, Mendelssohn, and, which the Zionist movement saw itself as giving the gospel of enlightenment, is a partly dehumanization movement, because what it did, that in Judaism we say Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tselem. Everybody is has a God's image inside him. What the Enlightened movement talked about is that there is a very small part of humanity that went through enlightenment, and now there are people in the full sense of the word, and the rest and big majority of humanity are all those who didn't go through this process, so they are like between man and monkey or whatever. And so they are not human beings to the full extent.
The communists have a similar mentality with re-educate the communists. and
Yeah.
re-education camps.
Yeah, I'm talking about a more general movement, because the Enlightenment movement is a basic to many movements, and Zionist is only a part of it. So this is part of what the discussion that we need to do, and telling the truth about the Yemenite babies affair, which I believe the scalpworm children affair is the same affair of the Yemenite children affair, and I can explain why I think so, because taking into account these two affairs, which is actually one affair, will, I think, force the Israeli mainstream to change, and the Israeli mainstream doesn't want to change. It will force it to change culturally in ways that Yitzhak talked before. So I was very much relating to what he said before, and I think that it will change to the better. I was speaking about tikkun. This is what I think the majority of the campaigners inside this affair mean. They don't mean to destroy everything. They mean that tikkun is needed yesterday. Now I can answer questions.
What was it?
Regulation.